So let's just go for it. Uh, okay, so hi everyone. I'm Saksham and I'm the social trends manager at Outgrow, and we're here today to talk about how you can create high converting content in 2019. To help us tackle this question, we have with us here Leonard Kim and his very cute dog Rue, who's been recognized.
Hi.
I mean, yeah, not the dog, but Kim has been recognized as a top marketing influencer by Forbes, top digital and youth marketer by INC magazine, and the top personal branding expert by Entrepreneur magazine. He's also the managing partner at Influence Tree, a brand accelerator where Kim and his team build and develop your personal or business brand. He currently resides in Los Angeles and loves cupcakes. So, getting to the heart of the matter, then, Leonard, what kind of cupcakes are you into?
There's this place called Magnolia Bakery. It's next to the Beverly Center in Los Angeles. They also have a location over in New York. They make these cupcakes, these red velvet ones. They're absolutely amazing.
Red velvet ones. Why are they red velvet?
I'm not sure. I think red velvet's like a flavor of chocolate with some red dye that's into it. And I don't know, for some reason, it just tastes a lot better than the chocolate one. It's a little less sweet, it's a little more colorful, and it's just fun to have.
Okay. And so like since we are at it, like because like we don't know why they're called Red Velvet, and I just figured out because like what Outgrow does is makes quizzes. So if you're like a company that makes cupcakes, you can really entice your users with like a cupcake quiz by using Outgrow. Like, what kind of a cupcake are you to like kind of like, build into like, have more than just like a direct selling a cupcake kind of like interaction with your customers. So anyway, moving on to more serious matters. So I'd ask you to introduce yourself, but obviously your reputation precedes you. And from what I've read online, it seems that you don't like to answer the question of what you do. And my team has warned me that if I ask you, what are you doing? You're very likely to respond, I am sitting in a webinar. Why is that? And what would you like to say to introduce yourself today?
Well, so many people, what they do is they ask you, what do you do? But they don't actually really care what you do. They're trying to look for people who are out there that can provide benefit in their lives based off their careers. Now, last time I checked, we're all multifaceted individuals. We have our own personal interests, our own set of beliefs. We're more than just who we are at work. And when you look at us from that bigger picture, like when someone asks you, what do you do? They're confining you into a box, which doesn't let you tell the full entire story. Like, let's theoretically say I used to do sales, right? If someone came up to me and they're like, oh, so what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a salesperson. They're like, oh, I gotta kind of step away and avoid talking to this person because I don't want to be sold on something. And all these people have these preconceived notions of what people do as opposed to who they truly are. So usually when I'm approached with that question, I technically answer what I'm doing at that exact moment. Like right now I'm petting Roo. So if someone asks me what I'm doing, I'd be like, yeah, I'm petting Roo and I'm speaking on a webinar. So I guess it's kind of cheeky the way I do it, but what I think most people should do is open up to find more common interests. Like imagine you met someone for the very first time and you're like, what's your favorite food? And they said pizza, and pizza was your favorite food too. Wouldn't it be so much easier to further that conversation, build that relationship, and make that connection as opposed to starting off with this question that so many people have difficulty answering, or people don't even like answering that question too?
That's an interesting way to look at it. So I'd say A, someone asks you what you do and you just answer like, oh, I'm a salesperson. It's kind of like categorized you into this kind of
Yeah.
cliche job. And B, from what you said, it seems like what you encounter when you're like dating someone, like on Tinder. If someone just like asks you like that direct question, what do you do? Instead of like, asking what are your interests or like, something interesting, if you just like go through this cliche way, it's not likely to lead to any interest in the individual. And I think this is what
Yeah.
you also generally talk about when you're talking about, building a personality. So do you think
Yeah.
it's related to that? Do you think that's where you're starting literally from? Like, these basic interaction things.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, you ask someone, what do you do online? And you're trying to pursue a relationship with them or even a date. and they just answer with one word, like, what happens to that conversation? Are you actually going to end up with a date? What's going to happen? Chances are it's probably not going to get very far. But now, if you ask someone something and it's something that you have a common interest in, then it's so much easier to further that a conversation, build a relationship, go out there and build enough trust where you're able to meet that person, go and talk to them and further that relationship. And that relates to business too. In business, like, let's say you get cold called by someone and then you're talking to them and you don't really care about what they're talking about. You're like, okay, how do I get off the phone as quickly as possible? Or if you're starting a conversation with someone online and they're immediately selling you something or telling you about what they do for work, like, you kind of encountered that same thing. If you're going out there and you're finding common ground beforehand, then it kind of builds that bridge so you're able to like mitigate that risk and build a better connection with someone.
And what do you think would be good business strategies? I mean, like to like literally take this lesson about simple human interaction and to apply it to business. What do you think would be a good business strategy to break the ice? Because that's what we're talking about here, right? To get to know someone at a personal level as soon as you meet them. And like I don't just mean anyone, but also customers, for instance. So
Well, online, there's multiple ways to go out there and connect with people. You could either do email, you could do videos, you could do articles, you could do all different types of content for for creating lead generation. And half of it's inbound and half of it's outbound. For those of you who don't know, inbound is what kind of gets people to come and contact you. Outbound's when you're going out and approaching other people. Now, no matter what you're creating, whether it's a video, an article, or something, what a lot of people tend to do is they tend to make it very businessy, right? Like, I don't know who said this, but someone out there said, oh, if you're going to go and create content online, make it as businessy as possible. Talk about all the facts about what you're doing, but kind of leave out that personal element. Last time I checked, we're all multifaceted creatures. We have our own interests, our own beliefs, and everything like that. So if these elements are from our personal lives, we could kind of incorporate that into the type of content that we're creating. Like, let's say you're doing an example, like the top 10 things you need to do to go and close leads. And let's say one of them was have a quiz, and number 2 was do a webinar, and number 3 was like, write an article. For number 2, do a webinar. Like, you could speak from your own personal experience. You could talk about how building common ground in a webinar is what converts. And then you could add in those personal elements. Like, I like to do a webinar because of XYZ. I like to do this because of that. And you're starting to tie in more of those personal elements into your business message. Because what people do is when you see so much content out there where it's all just business related, it all kind of blends in together and all looks the same. What makes your article unique? What makes your video unique? What makes your quiz unique? It's that personal touch. Those personal elements that you've attained throughout your entire personal life, whether you're 20, 30, 40 years old, you have a whole entire life history there. And if you start to incorporate those pieces into what you do and tie in more of those personal elements, you might be scared to do it at first. You might think that people might judge you and mock you or things like that. But really what it does, it makes that deeper connection with you. Like when I used to do sales, step 1 would be to meet and greet someone. Step 2 would be to sell yourself. And in order to sell yourself, what I usually did is I was like, oh, hi, so you're in the area. Do you go to school? Are you working? What do you like to do for fun? Like, do you like to go to the beach? Do you like to go surfing? Do you like to go skateboarding? And you kind of ask these questions because you want someone else to go, oh, yeah, you know what? I love skateboarding too. And you could go out there and respond to those types of things. But on the internet, you can't go and ask those questions. So instead, what you do is you talk about them and other people are reading that and going, me too. I like that too. And that's what builds you that connection that the other person doesn't have.
yeah, it's an interesting way to approach it. Yeah. And I feel also that on the internet, because you're talking about questions and you're saying the internet has been rather one way rather than like two way as you could like normally have in like a day-to-day conversation.
Mhm.
And since we are talking about questions, then Outgrow does make quizzes, and I feel like some personality quizzes, and especially with the rise of BuzzFeed, you can actually see that. And especially like when people share all these personality quizzes, like coming back to our original example, what kind of a cupcake are you, or what kind of a chocolate cookie are you, what kind of a chocolate cookie are you is like one of the most shared BuzzFeed quizzes. But what is that quiz about? It's about like a personality. Like
Yeah.
it's really cashing in on like a personality. So I feel on the internet, and this is where interactive content comes in, because what we are talking about is like, an interaction, a two-way process. And so I think what we're kind of trying to build in here is that, putting your personality into a quiz and making users realize at the same time, and customers realize that, uh, that this is not just like any other random content on the internet. There's some effort that's been put into it. The users trying to get to know you and all that. So yeah. So what do you have to think about like, interactive content, helping it to make it a more two-way process than, a blog post?
Well, one of the things that you could do to make your content more interactive instead of a two-way post is going out there and always leaving a call to action at the end so that people could go out there and contact you. Another thing that you could do to make it interactive is, like, let's say you're doing the 10 steps to XYZ. At the every single step, you could ask a specific question for a quiz and be like, okay, if you do this, for a webinar to be effective, what do you have to do? A, B, C, or D? So like the person would have to read the content and then kind of be tested with that knowledge that they just read to see how well they're engaging. Carlos says I need a girlfriend instead of a dog, but I have a wife, so I'm not sure how that really helps. Anyways, back to that. Like, if you have these quiz questions involved.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, maybe I need to. So if
Well,
you have these quiz questions involved, like for me, what I like to do is I like to build out thought leadership in a specific way. So like, let's say we're doing a top 10 list, and let's say number one on the list was do jumping jacks to get in the best shape of your life. What I would do is first I would say you have to go out there and do jumping jacks. Then I back it with two pieces of research. Like jumping jacks are important to do because Navy SEALs do them or some other group of people, and find two different references for that. Then I find a celebrity who goes out there and does jumping jacks and what kind of results they got from doing it. Then after I incorporate that, I talk about how I use jumping jacks in my personal life to get in the best shape. As you can tell, I don't do jumping jacks, so this is an example. Then after I move in from that personal example with how it affects my life, I talk about how people could go out there and incorporate it themselves in their own life. What I mean by thought leadership is when you're talking about your set of expertise, what you need to do is kind of provide the information that really shows people why you're the expert at what you do. And when you're doing that, you want to use the personalized examples from your own life. You want to use research to show that you're well versed in it, but also you want to indicate how people could go out there and do these things in their own life too. Now, to give it some more flavor on the edge, to make it a little bit more interactive, when you incorporate a quiz into that, like what's the best way to do jumping jacks? Is it at home? Is it at work? Is it something like that? You can take the content that they read, make sure that they read it, and also see how well they absorb that knowledge so you could tie it all together. That's how you can use one of those outgrow tools to kind of make that content a little bit more interactive instead of having it just be informational. Now, informational content still works because if you really hit a nerve with your content and it really resonates with someone else, what they're going to end up doing is they're going to end up looking you up online, figuring out how to contact you, and reaching out to see how you could help them with their business, with their work, or whatever they're creating too.
yeah, that's very true. So you're saying it has to be done in a step-by-step manner, starting with like, trying to build your personality in and engaging the customers in the article as you go through, and then finally, like, putting a quiz there to try to like get the responses and test their knowledge, and also like to make it more interactive.
Yeah.
And I think also what you can also do is also like, once they do the quiz, based on their responses, you can like segment them and then retarget them with like, more content based on like, how they've answered the questions, what's their goals from this exercise, etc., etc. Okay, so well, let me move on to another part, because like we've heard your TED talk, which is obviously very famous. So I was going to ask you that obviously our company Outgrow encourages marketers from across the board to use interactive experiences like quizzes, calculators, polls, recommendations, and chatbots. Now, these help companies to bridge the gap between the customer and the product and also help in boosting lead generation, as
Mhm.
we've just talked about. Now, from your very famous TED Talk, we also know that one of the first startups you worked on was a lead generation startup. And you said it didn't actually turn out so well for you. So, can you talk more about what lessons you learned from that failure, where the future of lead generation is headed, and finally, how much has having a foundational background in lead generation shaped the way you perceive marketing today?
So I think I was doing lead generation back in 2008, about 8 years ago. And back then, it was kind of a lot different than it was today. I wasn't that well versed in these online technologies, and we were kind of doing our lead generation the old school way, where we were doing it by phone. Some of the key things that I learned is what really triggers people to give you responses and become leads and show interest in what you're doing. But also at the same time, when you're working with the phone system, you kind of also realize how many people you have to get through before you could actually get to a lead who actually wants to go and move forward with becoming a lead. Now, when you're working offline and you're working on the phone, you're kind of limited to a certain amount of phone calls a day, talking to a certain amount of people, and you're very limited with the type of reach that you could accomplish. So when you put a price per lead on there, you have hard costs that are associated to really get that lead to the next level. And then what ends up happening is there comes a point where that cost per acquisition starts to become higher and higher and higher. At first, those leads, they were pretty solid and it was pretty easy to get them at a really cheap rate. But as time surpassed, it just became a little bit higher and higher and higher. Plus, at the same time, we only had a limited time per day. So that ended up causing the business to lose revenue, which ultimately led it to fail. Now, with that type of experience, like over the last few years, I've kind of dived into the digital world to really figure out how things work. Using that understanding, it kind of made the digital, the or the learning curve for the digital area a little bit easier to understand and easier to get through because now one of the things with the digital world is it's so much easier to have a larger ad set. You can
Mhm.
target people by zip code. You can target people by city, by state, by country, by certain parts of the world. You can target
Interests.
people from like interests, from age groups, and you can target multiple groups in multiple different settings. And then you can create the same ad for these different ad sets to see which one does better than the other one. And you're not even paying $30 per lead like I used to. What you end up paying, or what we used to sell the leads for, like the leads become a lot more inexpensive because you have all these online platforms to kind of cut down those costs for the hard labor. Also, at the same time, when you're going out there and you're creating different ad sets, you can compare one ad set to another ad set. And let's say there are two with the exact same copy, but they have different images. You can see which one's performing better. And then you could go and you could take that again and you could switch it with two different ones with the same picture with two different versions of copy to see which one does better. Then you could flip one to be text and one to be video and see which one does better. So you could slowly test until you get the perfect campaign.
Mhm. So this is again like A/B testing, A/B testing, A/B testing. You keep doing that until you like, refine your entire campaign, and you can do that pretty fast.
Yeah.
But it's funny that you mentioned that you were doing it in 2008, and I don't know whether the iPhone was out and about. It was, of course, out and about at that point. But the point is, like, I think it's been a great shift in technology in a very less amount of time. So you're talking about a startup that you were working in that was using telephones to make these, to generate these leads, and now we have completely shifted to the digital age where they probably do use telephones, but like not as much. But like a thing like an interactive experience would probably not at all be a thing in 2008. So
Yeah.
now it's a thing, and so since this webinar is about what's going to be the next thing in 2019, so what do you think is going to be like? Because it's shifting rapidly and exponentially. So we can assume like as much time as it took from 2008 to 2018 is going to take half of that amount of time to change the entire the entire foundation completely. So in 5 years' time, or like let's just say next year, what do you think is going to happen? Which way are we headed in this lead generation business?
Well, we've already made great strides already. We see people who are going out there and they're creating an ad where, like, let's say I go on to Amazon and I'm looking at a specific product, and next thing you know, I go on Facebook. I see that same ad for that same product there. That's something called retargeting, where you see a product, it kind of follows you around on the internet. Now, what's happening now is artificial intelligence with like Facebook, Google, and all these other platforms. They have a system called machine learning. And what machine learning does is you combine it with predictive analytics. You combine all these things together, and these algorithms, this artificial intelligence, what it really does is it begins to learn who you are as a whole, your interests all together. Like, you probably heard of a situation where someone was like, oh, I was just talking about pet food. The next thing you know, I saw a pet food ad on my computer. It's so creepy. Now, the phone's probably not overhearing you say that you saw pet food. What ends up happening is the algorithm gets so good at predicting that what you want, that it seems like a coincidence. It seems like someone's stalking you, but that algorithm's so good that it understands exactly what you're looking for. So these ads of things that you potentially want do follow you around, and you see them all the time. Now, when we look at the future, what's going to end up happening? Artificial intelligence is going to be embedded into our everyday lives. We're going to have things go on everywhere. We have smart systems already. I would name her, but then she'll start talking and playing a song. So I'm not going to say her name. But there's other things like Google Home and things like that where, they start to really go out there and be embedded into our world. So instead of things coming out and being like in front of us, like, we'll be able to interact with things. We'll be able to go and grow with these platforms. And then it just becomes a seamless experience where you're generating, when you're the business owner who's trying to generate leads, when you're integrated into these technologies, you're having these technologies kind of work for you on your behalf to recommend your products to the people who actually want them, as opposed to going out there and trying to figure out who wants my product, who doesn't.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think in such a situation where clearly you are like we're going to move towards machine learning and algorithms that are going to determine stuff, and of course interactive content where users can literally chug in information so that the algorithm works better and recommends better things to them. Where do you think ebooks and blog posts and white papers stand in this? Like, are they going to remain? Are they going to like become interactive? What's going to happen to them?
Well, there's always going to be a portion of the audience that prefers reading over visual. And like, let's say we're looking like at an office environment, right? If you have a 9 to 5 job, chances are it's going to be extremely difficult for you to watch a video between the hours of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. because most people work on an open floor. They have people walking by all the time, their bosses, their superiors, and things like that. So in those hours, you're kind of like forced to be stuck into the text game where you're looking at articles, you're looking at ebooks, and you're looking at things like that. Now, is that going to change? Like 5 years from now, for that to kind of shift in the office environment, there's going to need to be some major changes across every single company out there. The probability of that happening is kind of low because companies don't really change that quickly. And in 5 years, it's kind of a lot of not enough time for them to kind of make those systems to move in that direction where they're like, you know what, we're going to let you watch video at work. I don't really see that happening. On the other hand, in 5 years from now, when we look at our personal lives from 6 p.m. and onwards when we're at home, we're going to have more interactive devices. When we go out to the store, it's going to be a lot more interactive. So when you're looking at your B2B audience or business-to-business audience, or the people that you're having consuming your product content when you're at work, those people are still going to need those written pieces of content. It just gets a lot more interactive when people leave the office. And what do most people do when they're in the office? They go on Google, they search for things, they spend time on Reddit, they're chatting with friends, they're reading articles. Like, that's what most people do for like 20 to 40% of their work days. So you still have a core audience that's going to be reading and everything. But you also have to consider what are people doing on their free time. That's when you have to really work on capturing their attention when they're outside of work.
Yeah, I think that's pretty right because I think, and as you earlier said, I think the more personality that is put into these blog posts and ebooks, the more engaging it's going to be for people to actually go to them and read them. And I just feel like, well, speaking of what people are doing in the office, they're also shopping in the office, like at least my friends, which is what, like, again, like coming back to interactive content, and this is something I heard in another TED talk as well, is the e-commerce recommendations. That's like one kind of interactive content that kind of builds into personality because it judges your personality and then recommends what you should buy. And that's one of the things that I was thinking about, like interactive content coupled up with personality and something you can do during your office hours. So I just feel like that's like something that Outgrow allows you to do as well. So I just feel like that's the direction it's kind of moving in.
Yeah.
And of course, like I think videos, I think is there. I mean, like video content has like a huge scope, but obviously they are limited by, you need to be hearing the video. And like, I think there's some limitations that come in there. So I feel, yeah, interactive content and ebooks can become like, ebooks and blog posts can themselves become interactive. Like it
Yeah.
can be a combination of text and like, feedback and like, all that sort of stuff. But let's move on to another question now. So fears, because your TED talk was about fears. So we've heard you so many times, not just at the TED talk about, how one should let one's fears guide them and about the 3 steps you suggest in order to make this happen, namely recognize the fear, face the fear, and do something about the fear, also known as the DSA step. Anyway, firstly, how do you think this applies to marketers today who are trying to create high converting content? And secondly, what suggestion would you have to give to Outgrow's clients who are already using interactive content?
Well, a lot of people, what they want to do is they want to create high converting content, but then when it comes to those special elements that really makes that happen, they're kind of scared to move forward because what you need to do to make your content high converting is you have to make it relatable. You have to speak directly to that one person who's reading your content. Now, what you have to do to speak to that one person is you kind of have to become personable. And what most marketers fear is that personal element. They're like, you know what? I'm fine talking about the company. I'm fine talking about the product. I'm fine talking about the features, the functions, the benefits. All that, no problem. But then when you say, add in some personal touch to it, show how much you care, add in like a little bit about your personality and what this means to you. That's where the marketers get stuck because they're like, I don't know, this is hard for me. It's really stressful. I don't know if I could go out there and convey this. It's scary. What are people going to think? And that's kind of where marketers especially get scared in the process because they don't want to go and showcase those personal sides of themselves, even if it will help create more higher converting content. So you have to really think about it though. Like most companies on the web, what did they get? A 1 to 3% conversion rate based off the people who visit their website. Everyone's looking for different ways to optimize their content. And you could go look at SEO and maybe that'll optimize your content by like 0.05%. Then you could go look at figuring out how to add in more details and features and functions and benefits. That could like raise it by maybe like 0.25. But if you want the highest raise in those conversion cycles, you have to go out there and tell those personal stories because that's what's really going to drive those conversions. It's just that most people are too scared to do that.
Hmm. Interesting. So, but what do you feel like? Well, obviously, this certainly applies to a lot of businesses, but then when you come to like bigger enterprises, one can't expect the let's just say the marketing lead or the marketing director to take on a personality of his own because then his personality is going to kind of clash with the company's kind of neutral personality because companies tend to like level it? So do you think they should like hire influencers to like do this on their behalf, or do you think this has to be done by an employee in the company? And then in that case, if one day the employee decides to leave the company, then what happens? Because then you have like, once you enter this like personality game, you can also be hurt, like, because like you talk about fear, so I think that might be a fear in their minds, right? Because if you're playing with this, then you might also like end up negatively in it. So what do you think about that?
Well, that's definitely a great question. And it really depends on what kind of company you have. Let's say you're a fashion brand, hiring
Hmm.
influencers works no problem. Now, most people in the world, we work in boring businesses, whether it's medicine and healthcare, like B2B, technology, like chances are you work in something very boring, right? And that's just how it is. Like these major corporations, like if you look at the Fortune 500, how many of those companies are cool? Maybe like 5 to 10 of them. All the other 495 of them, like they're like banks, they're insurance companies, they're like medical companies. Like it's like what's so exciting about that? Now, me personally, I worked with a company called Keck Medicine of the University of Southern California for the last 3 years. They employ over 500 physicians who work over at their facilities. And what they do is for their brand, they have a very structured message, right? It's neutral. They don't go out there and talk about specific things. It's very, and then that brand has its own specific brand, right? What I just rolled out recently is I did a boot camp with them on how they could go out there and have their physicians go and build their personal brands too. Because what you really need is when you look at a brand message, like let's look at all these big companies. They've been doing social media for the last 3 to 5 years. They've kind of plateaued with how much reach they could get. So like if you look at Cisco and they have 50,000 followers now, chances are that's as far as they're going to go. If you look at McDonald's and they have 1 million followers, that's as far as they're ever going to get because we've all liked all the pages we're going to like for brands so far, right? No one's out there going, oh, you know what? I'm going to go like a new page for social media for a brand. So what you do is when you tie in these personal elements, these people who go out there and start talking about themselves and what they do and their thought leadership and share their personal stories, you're able to go outside of that brand message and you can create this thing where the brand halo helps build up the physician who's marketing themselves, and the physician is able to help move up the brand halo too. So they kind of grow together. Now, with people, what you're able to do is you're able to build trust a lot faster. You're able to build that community. You're able to speak directly to the people. So you become a lot more relatable to that audience. When you're creating content, people look at you in a very different light than they do for companies. And because there's that contrast, what ends up happening is you're able to go out there and create one more niche specific content that's based on the physician's expertise. And two, you're able to relate and show your personality traits so people can buy into you as opposed to the company. Now, let's say we're in a Facebook group, for example, and then you see someone who's posting about something and you see a lot of their personality. You're like, wow, this person's a little bit interesting. Maybe I want to get to know more about them. You Google them, you look them up, you look at their content, figure out who they are, what their ratings are, and you get to know more about them. Then you're like, oh, wait, where does this person work? Then you're like, oh, wow, that company has this service. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Now, you're able to lead with your personality to get people to read your content, get to know more about you, then go and look for what you do for your work. And if it has that synergy, guess what? You have a new client. Now, let's look at it from the opposite end of the spectrum. You see a group on Facebook and someone's posting branded content from their company page. You're like, oh, it's just another brand putting out their content. I don't care. And so many people, when they see brands trying to tell stories, they think it's inauthentic. They think it's fake. They think it's like forced. They're not really able to connect with that brand. So what's going to really drive that conversion for you? It's leading with the people.
Interesting. So, because that's the general direction I feel like Instagram more is moving towards. Because like I think influencer marketing is something just like it's like rooted in Instagram. What's happening in Instagram? Because even like big companies, they hire influencers on Instagram to place their products. So if Adidas doesn't want to have a face of Adidas, the CEO, doesn't want to show his face, like, doesn't want to be like an active influencer. Instead, what they do is they hire people who are already kind of famous, like, little influencers on Instagram, and place the products there. So they approach it in that way.
For
Uh,
for
yeah.
consumer products,
Mhm.
food, like beauty products, clothing, skincare, that
Mhm.
works, right?
Mhm.
But then most people aren't selling clothes, food, and things like that.
True.
Like we have
Yeah.
these weird businesses that we're in that are kind of really important, but then they don't have that fun edge, you know? And then when you're looking for an influencer, like let's say I have this phone service that I need to go out there, or I own a phone service company. For me to go out there and talk about that as an influencer, is that really effective?
Probably not. I mean, like, also you couldn't do it on Instagram. You'd probably do
Yeah,
it on your Insta story. You could be like, oh, but that would just be like too obvious. So
yeah.
I guess, yeah, it has to be.
But
But
then now, if you're a employee of the company and you're talking about your personal experience, can you kind of talk about that phone service even if it's boring? It's a little bit easier, right?
yeah, but like you also have to like at the same time put out the uh opinions expressed are my own and not of the company, depending on how big your company is.
Yeah.
Uh, like, because you might also go wrong. But yeah, I get your point, really. So you feel at some point we need to stop looking at the whole situation as, oh, you're going to your job, but actually you have to be like, oh, what can I do for it? Like, can I actually go there and influence people as an employee of this company to like, use the products? Yeah. Okay.
Well,
So that's
if
an
you
interesting
if you
thought.
look at Macy's, Macy's is already doing this. They're giving their employees the opportunity to go out there and share the products within Macy's and sell them through their Instagram accounts and on their social media. So if you see this trend happening now, this is going to become the norm in the future, where companies are going to have that wake up moment, that light bulb moment where they're like, you know what? It's not about going out there and promoting everything from the company brand. We have to get our executives on board, have them go out there and build their personal brands and be in the spotlight too. Now, most people, what they use their social media for is they go either 100% business or 100% personal. And you rarely see someone go like halfway in between, right? It's pretty rare. The reason for that is because most people feel that when they're personal networks, they have to stay 100% personal, and on their business networks, they have to stay 100% business. But the truth of the matter is, like, let's say we look at it from a different situation. We've heard of the 80-20 rule. What if we did 80% personal and 20% business? 80% of the time, people are being able to get to know us, get to know who we are. And we already do that already with our personal Facebook accounts. If we're working at a company, if we're doing anything, we're talking personally on these networks. Now, what if we just sprinkled in 20% of business in there too? If you're too scared to start at 20%, maybe do 10%. If you're someone who's going out there and doing 100% business already, once you start sprinkling in that personalized content that's about you, your interests, like cupcakes and things like that, guess what? You're going to build more rapport with your audience of who's listening to you. More people are going to be attracted with what you're doing. And you're going to be able to start to generate more connections out there and get your company more acknowledgement in the community and even more customers.
Yeah, I completely understand. So it's like, not being obviously salesy,
Yeah.
but having a personality out there, showing that you're actually interested, genuinely interested in the product. So if you're like a cupcake maker, you have all this information, or like, you talk about the product. You don't try to like sell it. You try to like go into like how it's made. You have like you do a webinar on cooking it or something. You show your personality as
Yeah.
well as things about it that take the product out from like this entire cycle of being a product. And okay, so in that way you can like use your personality and your knowledge to kind of come closer to your customers, and this is what we should be doing. We should be making it more personal. That's what you're trying to say, right?
Yeah, like if you watch Top Chef, what makes Top Chef so interesting isn't that there's 16 chefs on the show cooking. It's because you get to see those personal elements with the people, their personalities, why you get to be involved in them making food. You get to see their unique interests, what they're learning and how they're growing. And that's what gets you to buy into the chefs. That's what makes you pick out a favorite chef character to follow. That's what gives you someone to root for. Now, if you bring those elements into your business too, guess what? The same things happen.
Hmm. All right. Well, okay, so let's move on to another thing. So, could you tell us more about influence tree since you've been like talking about the personality and how important that is? So, what do you do in your business, influence tree, and what kind of an industry does it cater to?
So Influence Tree does a few different things. So many people out there want to learn how to build their personal brands, get into publications, grow their social media following. But, so many people don't really have the budget to really go out there and do things. We have an affordable course that teaches people everything that they need to know to build their personal brands. And me and my business partner, Ryan, we teach every single thing that we know in these courses. Now, some people, what they end up doing is they go through this experience. In those courses, we cover the 4 V's. One's vision. That's how you position yourself into the market. Next, we move into voice, which is the words that you're communicating out there, how to connect with your target market, who your target market is, how to create thought leadership and things like that. Then we move into volume, and that's how to go out there and syndicate your content and run ads so you can get additional views on your content. I remember the first time I posted something online, it got 3 views, and I was like, wow, this really sucks. A few years later, I went and learned syndication tactics, and within that first month, I had 100 views on the first piece of content I wrote. So the next first piece of content I wrote. So that led to like 2 million reads within the first 6 months and 10 million within the first year and a half. So those results can kind of go out there and really hit a lot of traction. Then we go into validation. And what validation is when you get a comment, when you get a DM, when you get someone saying they're interested in your product, when you get invited to a podcast, onto a radio show, and to be featured in the media and things like that. We teach you how to go and either A, achieve those, 2, success stack them, or 3, really go out there and earn those from other people. Now, the next phase of it is consulting. Some people out there, they're like, you know what, this course material is great. I still need a little hand holding. So we help walk them through that, and that costs a few $1,000s a month to really do. And then the next level above that is where we help the content creator or help the person who owns a company or an executive at a company go out there and create the content for them. We hop on the phone with them once a week. We get their insights and we go and create all the thought leadership for them so they don't have to go out there and do things. Like that starts at about $10,000 a month. It's pretty expensive and not many people can afford it. Then the other thing that we do is we go into companies, me and my business partner Ryan, and we hold workshops with the people who are working there, and we teach them how to go and build their personal brands to have them complement the business brand as well.
Okay, so could you like repeat the 4 V's again? So there's
The first the first V is vision.
uh-huh.
The second one is voice. The third
Mhm.
one's volume, and the
Mhm.
fourth one's validation.
Vision, voice, volume, validation.
Mhm.
Okay, so if you had to recommend any of Outgrow's, quizzes, polls, recommendations, or e-commerce recommendations or tests to one of your influence tree clients in this entire cycle of 4 V's, what's it going to be? Like,
I'd say the best thing to do is in the voice section when you're creating content, you could really go out there and use the quiz tools to really go out there and help you communicate your voice and embed that into your content that you're sharing. With the voice, that's the message that you're communicating into the world. But what I find is a little bit more important than the voice is the vision. That's how you're positioned. That's when people come across your page, how they get to know you, how they're able to relate to you, why they want to connect with you, why they feel an affinity to you. Like for
mm,
me, there's so many times when I hop on the phone with someone who wants our services, and they're like, "Oh my God, I know everything about you. I love this and this and this," and then like it gives me that leverage, right? Because they feel like they already know me for like 5, 10, 20 years and that I'm like their brother, right? So when you have that positioning down right, it just makes everything so much easier in the process.
Okay. Because like to me, this kind of sounds like, you know how funnel works, right?
Yep.
Like a top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and then bottom of the funnel. So I just feel like the four processes that you've kind of described here, they also kind of like, are taking you through a funnel. I just feel like, because like we have like experiences that kind of cater to all of these. So obviously, uh, the what is your clientele composed of usually? What do you think is the
So the people who come to me for those done for you services that cost about 5 figures a month, those are usually Fortune 500 executives. They're
Mhm.
New York Times bestselling authors, they're venture capitalists, and they're kind of in that range. The people who come for the course, they're usually entrepreneurs who really want to stand out, people who want to move from like let's say a regular employee to like a manager at their job, or from a manager to director. And then the people who kind of are in between are kind of like a hybrid of both who, because an executive, what they could do is they could go, hey, XYZ company that I work for, give me money to pay for the service. And they don't have to go out of pocket that 10 grand, right? Because like who really has 10 grand laying around in their pocket? I don't even think I have 10 grand laying around, right? So not a lot of people really have that. So the companies usually end up paying for that. But then for the consulting, like sometimes they could get their company to meet them halfway or partially, and sometimes they'll put in the money too. And that's usually like a relationship where we help get people propelled off the ground until they could go out there and do things on their own and be a bird that flies. Yeah.
So you're actually building, you're helping them build a personality, exactly what you were talking about earlier in this webinar, that within whatever company they are in, they should learn to assert their own personality to further the company's goals.
For the $10,000 a month and above, we do it all for them. They don't have to really do anything except for just approve the content. For the consulting, what we do is we tell our client what to do.
Hmm.
They do it, then we review it, and then we make suggestions. So it's kind of like they get a second pair of eyes from someone who from people who understand the market, understand what people are looking for to really go out there and make those differences. And then the do-it-yourself package, they're just doing it.
Themselves.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so let me just move on to rapid fire round questions. So try to make these
Okay.
ones as short as possible. You seem very excited about it. So
Oh
let's the first one.
yeah.
Who's your favorite marketer?
My favorite marketer used to be Neil Patel. I went to high school with him, but I don't know. I don't think I have a favorite marketer anymore.
Okay, that was a funny answer, but okay. Your favorite TED Talk?
My favorite TED Talks, Brene Brown, The Power of Vulnerability.
The power of born your ability. A
Vulnerability.
vulnerability. Okay. I literally
Sorry.
had the power of born your ability. And I was like, okay,
Uh,
vulnerability. Okay, that could be another V in the
oh
entire
yeah.
V's. I'm like, speaking of V's. But okay, I'll check that out. The best advice that has ever been given to you, if you had to sum
Someone
it up in one sentence.
someone once told me, no one is absolutely useless. You can always serve as a bad example. One day I was like, oh, that's me.
Oh, because this is the premise of your entire TED talk where you're like, oh, even if there was a failure, I can use the failure to
Yeah.
like turn it around. So interesting. Moving on. One word advice you want to give to a startup. Well, not one word. I think that'll be too tough. But can you try one word?
Go.
Go. That's a nice word, actually. All right, so one sentence. Go is good enough, but let's just give a sentence as well.
Okay. It's going to be a scary and tough journey. Just make sure to test everything along the way. Don't wait for things to be perfect, and continually test and move in small increments. Don't jump for the fences. Sorry. Don't leap for the stars.
Hmm. Interesting. And the next one is, how do you, like, in one sentence, what is the best way to follow up with people who've used your content?
The best way to follow up with people who what?
Who've used your content, whether it's interactive content or like, blogs or like anyone who's like, gone through your content. What's the best way to follow? What is the best strategy?
Retargeting. So
Mm,
what retargeting is let's say you have a website and you can embed this piece of code into it, and what that does is it lets people it tracks who comes and visits your website. So you know those ads that follow you around when you put like a
mm.
piece of pizza in your cart at Amazon and follows you everywhere.
The pixel.
Retargeting is where you could kind of go out there and use that pixel and create ads so then those specific people who've already seen your content can continue to see more of it.
Okay. The next one is your favorite Twitter personality. Speaking of personalities, yeah.
My favorite web personality?
Twitter personality.
Twitter personality? That's a good question. Winnie Sun, she's fun. She's a financial advisor. She goes out there and she's really friendly and cool. So check her out.
Mm. And I was wondering, speaking of which, like, because we were talking about this earlier, what do you think of personalities like Elon Musk, who like, they're using their brand, like you said, Tesla is kind of like boosted by Elon Musk's personality, but also at times really comes down because of Elon Musk's personality. There's been like him saying things at Twitter, which are like sometimes not taken that well, but many times taken well. So what do you think about that?
Well, one of the things you want to do is you want to kind of stay true to yourself. Elon Musk is very true to himself. He's who he is. Everything he does not resemble everything that Tesla does. So some things he says Tesla could be held accountable for, but other things that's on Elon Musk. Now, when you're going out there, like we're kind of in the new PC culture where you kind of have to be careful what you're saying, and you kind of have to like the people who are kind of moving ahead are the people who are kind, compassionate, and like bold, while the people who are kind of being replaced in companies are the people who are like cocky, arrogant, demeaning, like people who like look down on you and things like that. So if that's kind of your personality traits, there's some great books like How to Win Friends and Influence People. There's some great classes that you can take to really work on that personality, but you still have to kind of stay true to who you are. Like if you feel that something's not right, you should probably go out there and say it,
Hmm.
but cautiously or read through what you're about to say and don't just hop from emotion and say something right away. Because if you say it the wrong way, people are going to just go and bully you about it. But if you say it the right way with the right message, then you're really going to be able to move that forward.
So do you think one should have like a Twitter manager for like your Twitter? Or do you
uh,
think you should just like
I don't think so. I mean, that most people should really go out there and do these things themselves because guess what? The easiest way to build that authentic trust with people is to really be yourself too.
Hmm, okay. So moving back to the rapid fire, so what's your favorite Outgrow template?
My favorite template for the Outgrow systems, the quizzes, because it gives you that ability to really interact with everything and create that compelling content and create that interactive side too. So you get both elements.
Okay, cool. So I think that kind of like wraps it up. Do you have any questions?
What's your favorite cupcake or what's your favorite dessert?
My favorite, well, this is like coming full circle, huh? Also because desserts, cupcakes are round, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
My favorite dessert is this very fancy pistachio cake that you get
What?
you can get it in like Berlin if
Uh-huh.
you ever fly to Berlin. It's a very fancy pistachio cake. It's really hard to describe except that it's made of like pure pistachio. And it's like an ice cream, but I don't like ice cream so much, so it's
What?
just like really tasty to have. So yeah, my friends discovered it for me one day. So yeah, it's got a lot of
Wow.
history in it.
We
And I
should
like to eat it
start.
slowly.
We should have started the conversation with this because now I'm happy and now I'm excited and now I'm looking forward to figuring out what this looks like.
Well, yeah, well, I'll send you a picture of it because, I mean, interactive content for 2019 aside, pistachio cakes is what the world is about. But yeah, so that's about it then. Well, thanks, Leonard, for being here and sharing your experience with us. And thank you, everyone, for watching Outgrow's Marketer of the Month. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, or whatever floats your boat to catch the next Marketer of the Month. And also do check out Leonard's company, Influence Tree, as well as our website, outgrow.co. Leonard, do you want to say something to them before we say goodbye?
I'm glad everyone made it out today. Rue's over here sleeping. She wants to say bye. She's not able to say it right now. She's a little tired. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to email me. It's hello@LeonardKim. I'm easily reachable. I respond to almost everything. Sometimes I have a bad day and I get depressed and I don't respond. But other than that, most of the time, if you catch me on a good day, you'll get a response pretty quickly. So yeah, let me know if you need anything.
All right then. See you then. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.